Hello and thank you for joining me today. Today we're going to be doing a tree in Brusho. Now this is a bit of a revisit of one of the videos that I did very early on when I first started YouTube. So I've been on YouTube now for a couple of years and I'm now up to about 2,500 subscribers. And when I look back at some of my earlier videos I think, oh gosh, the editing wasn't quite as good as it should have been. And of course we're always improving and I've still got a lot of room for improvement and we're always learning about how to edit and one thing and another. But when I look back at this video, which is a very popular video and everybody seems to like this tree in Brusho, I see that my arm is very much in the way of what I'm showing you when I'm showing you how to do it. So I thought I would redo it today for those of you that did like it and would like to see more about the actual process of how I did it. So to begin with, sorry, I should say I will link that video up here as well. Now to begin with, I did the drawing just in water and I've got a number 6 brush with a nice tip on it. It's just a synthetic one. Now at this stage you can't see what you're drawing because you're doing it in water, so if you're not as confident and you would prefer, you can actually do the drawing with just adding a little touch of either ink or Brusho to that water before you start, but I'm quite happy just doing it in water. And it's just an imaginary tree shape, so just, and the thing about trees is making these nice branch shapes. If you just lift your brush off the paper and let them sort of disappear, you get those nice fine ends to the branches. So, but you don't need to do too much drawing at this stage, just the main trunk and 1 or 2 main branches off. So like I say, if you prefer to be able to see more, just pop a tiny amount of ink into that water and that will help you to see where you're going, but you don't want it too coloured that it's going to take away from the colour of the Brusho. So to begin with, I'm using burnt sienna. You can see I've taken the lids off, and the reason for this is I like to have a lot of control and I like to use a little brush to sprinkle the powder. So this brush is always kept very dry and clean, and I just sprinkle that into that water that we've put down. And of course some of that's going to land where there isn't any water, and if you want at this stage you can tilt your book as well to make that flow further into those areas that we've already got there. And some of it's actually starting to dry. I went much further with those branches, but they're starting to dry, so we don't need to worry about that because we can put more branches in again afterwards. Okay, so that just gives you the basic trunk shape to begin with, just with that little bit of burnt sienna. And then I'm going to get the canopy more, I'm going to very lightly mist some water on, but I don't want the water to be everywhere, so I use a board. Sometimes you'll see me, I use my hand, but I use a board to keep the water away from where I don't want it to be, and I'll just lightly mist that top part of the book. So this is a mixed media pad. Now in the first video that I did, it was autumn I think, and we did very autumny colours, but I'm going to use a bit more green this time, so I'm using the olive green for the canopy of the tree, and just a very light sprinkling because we want the white of the paper to shine through as if we've got some sunlight coming through the tree there. So a very light sprinkling on there. And then we'll pop some water down the bottom to get the ground, leaving it blank in between so we get a nice bit of space in between there. Of course if you did want, you could do a background of a blue sky or whatever. I quite like it nice and fresh against the white of the paper. So now we've just got water down there at the top and this bit in the middle is quite dry at the minute. So we'll put some, again we'll put some green in as if we've got some grass and leaves going on down at the bottom. So it's a very quick and easy way of doing a tree, but of course you could do much more. You could do more hedgerows and things than this on a bigger piece of paper. And I'm going to also add some lemon to make it, sorry, no gamboge, to make it nice and sunny. So the thing with Brushos is don't add too much pigment or too much water. If you overdo it, your colours soon become muddy, and as they dry they move quite a lot, so you don't want them to be you know, they'll sink into the paper and become muddy as they dry as well. So when you think you're getting there with it wet, you know, you want to leave it, you don't want to overdo it. So I also want a little bit of dark in this trunk to give us the impression that it's perhaps darker on one side, or that the sun's coming from behind and there's some dark areas of the trunk. So I'm going to add some ultramarine. You can see I like this colour, I've used a lot of it, and just try and put it up one side of the trunk. Again, this is why I like using this brush technique, because you get some control over where you're putting your powder, and anything that's loose on the dry areas we can take off later. And I will just put a little bit in the canopy, because of course at this time of year all those leaves in the trees cast their own shadows on the underside of the canopy there, and perhaps some down here as well. So you can see I dust off that brush in between times, and now I'm going to use a spatula, and this can just give us a little bit more shape, so we can sort of anchor the tree to the ground a bit more, bring the trunk down into the ground, you know, just mix the colours more as if we've got a flatter area of ground where perhaps there's some grass and some shadow there. And then we can perhaps put some areas maybe that of grass coming up. So there's all sorts of things you can do with your spatula to manipulate the paint around, because at this time of year quite overgrown. And now we can put some extra branches in, like those ones that we lost earlier. So all you do is go up with your spatula, and of course you're dragging the pigment and you're dragging it out across where the paper is wet. And it doesn't matter if there's one or two gaps in that, because it maybe looks as if you've got some sunlight there on the edges of those branches. And just cross them and come in different directions. Don't have them all going in the same direction. Like I say, the paper was a little bit dry with that initial drawing. That's down to the weather at the moment. It's very warm in here. Should have been quicker to work that. So here, where we want it to be a little, the ends of the branches want to come out further, we can just add some water again at this stage. And at this stage you can really start to manipulate things. So if you want some darker colour, you can just pick it up with your brush and add it into there. Maybe you might want the trunk to be a little bit wider at the bottom here. Just looks a little bit top heavy. And again, just get your initial colour. This burnt sienna is a little bit redder than the last pot that I had. The trouble with Brusho is they're not true pigments, they're a mix of colours, as we know, which is why we like them, because all these beautiful colours come out when we sprinkle them. But the other downside to that is you can't really replicate the colours. You know, like I say, I've had a pot of that before and it was much browner, so they're not true in the mixing of the colours. Okay, and if there's any bits that you don't like, you can try and lift them while it's still quite wet. Like that's sort of coming over the edge there. I don't particularly like that. I mean, it's not a big problem. It's very difficult to lift once it's dry, because it does sort of sink into the paper. But at this stage, you can lift areas. If you want some areas of light out with a tissue, where it's very damp, you can still lift a little bit out, but I'm actually hesitant to lift anything out of this. It looks quite nice as it is. Perhaps just put a little bit of light into the ground there, a bit of sunshine coming down. Okay, so I think that's probably enough on that tree. I don't want to overdo it and spoil it. Like I say, if you haven't seen that previous video I talked about, it's had an awful lot of views, so I do thank everybody who's looked at that. But like I said, I did want to just talk through it a little bit more and have my arms out of the way so you could see what I was doing, particularly with the spatula. And you know, at the end of the video on the last one, you couldn't see what I was doing with that spatula. But basically, once you've got the colours on there, like I said, don't overdo the colours, don't put too much on, and once they're on there, you can use your brush and a little bit of extra water, or a damp brush and a spatula, just to manipulate things a little bit and make them into more of a form. Thank you for watching. I hope you found that useful. I'll be back again soon with some more videos, both on Brusho and other mixed media. In the meantime, if you've got any comments or questions that you'd like to ask about the Brusho, if you want to pop those in the comments below, I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.